So we are now discussing the origin of the 39 melachot. Previously we spoke about the list, how it appears in the Mishnah, and how it seems to be a list that is made from pre-existing lists. One that deals with how to make bread, how to make garments from wool, how to make garments and all byproducts from with animal origin, meaning the killing an animal, skinning, etc. And finally, a set of melachot that deal with construction. Now, but the question is, how do we get to this list and to the number 39, or the famous way that Talmud puts it, 40 haser achat, 40 minus 1. So
that's even before getting into the toladot, right?
Right, just the avot. We're talking about the avot. We spoke about already that we talk about that. That we have the fathers and the sons, or the category and the subcategory. But the subcategories are not mentioned in the Mishnah. This is purely Talmud. It's come to Talmud. So the Talmud gives different opinions. In the Gemara, we find this: Keneged melacha melachto umelechet shebatorah 40 haser achat. It says that the word melacha, which means work, is mentioned in the Torah 39 times. Now, so this is a strange source, because he says that just the appearances of the word, it appears in different contexts, not necessarily in the sense of prohibitions, right? In many cases, it will be the description of the work of the Mishkan, v'kol ha'osim b'melacha, all those who worked. So how can you count this as a word towards the prohibition? Besides that, there's a problem. It's because the word melacha appears many more times than 39 in the Torah. So some want to say that if you count only the times that the word melacha is mentioned while building the Mishkan, but this is also a problem because then you have less than 39. So then they will say, throw in the word avodah also, which is a synonym. But this is only one of the explanations of the number 39. There are others. Rabbi Hanina bar Hama Omer, Keneged avodot HaMishkan. This is another opinion that became the official opinion expounded on in halakha later on, that all the works that were needed for the construction of the Mishkan are forbidden on a regular Shabbat. Not the maintenance of the Mishkan, the construction of the Mishkan. And that is because we have the juxtaposition several times. The Torah says, Et Shabbatotai tishmoru u'mikdashi tirav. Observe the Shabbat and revere the temple. So the assumption is that what the Torah is trying to tell us, that even though you have to build a Mishkan, still it doesn't mean that you can transgress Shabbat. The problem with that is that in the Mishkan itself, many things were done on a regular basis on Shabbat that are not allowed for others, mainly slaughtering and feeding the fire. But that's another, we'll put this aside.
Can I ask you just a clarifying question?
So that's the second opinion, right? The one opinion said that it's the number of the word melacha in the Torah. The other one says it's the melachot that were needed for the construction of the Mishkan. In the Yerushalmi Talmud of Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Bon בשם רבי שמואל בר נחמני אומר, כנגד 40 חסר אחת שכתוב במשכן עבודה ומלאכה. This is what I mentioned before. 39 times with the building of the Mishkan, we have the word avodah and melacha, so synonyms for work. Then there are two other opinions. They say the word ele, right? Ele הדברים אשר ציווה השם לעשות אותם. Those are the issues that Hashem commandment. Ele הדברים Sheshet Yamim Ta'aseh Melacha. You have to work for 6 days and rest on the 7th. So the word Ele, the numerical value of the word Ele is 36, right? And Aleph is 1, Lamed is 30, Hey is 5. So together it's 36. Then you take the word Hadevarim, the issues, which is plural, so it's 2. So together with 36 it becomes 38. And then the word Hadevarim itself is counted as 1. So 39. So this is really very contorted to get too sophisticated. If God wants us to know that there are 39 prohibited things on Shabbat, he should say, these are the 39 things that are forbidden. Because if you take it from the numerical value of the word ele hadevarim, how do I know that I look at the word ele, which is 36, and add some elements to it, and not in the next word, hadevarim, the issues, which numerical value would be 261. So it's really complicated, right? And then there's another opinion in the Gemara that says, you don't need that to add the 1 and 2, because the letter Hey looks like Het, and Het in numerical value is 8, so you get 39. So what do we get from all that? It seems very confusing, all that. But all we learn from all these hints and allusions in the Torah is that there is a number 39. But none of them specifies exactly what those 39 melachot are. So it seems like all these rabbis in the Talmud that speaks about the origin of 39 melachot are suggesting that the rabbis who created the list worked with a number. They started with a number, like you mentioned before. Either they had this number by tradition, or they decided, let's create a nice number that people could relate to. 39, Arba'im Haser Ahat was. It also appears in the halacha regarding lashes. If one has to get lashes in Bedin, say the maximum number could be 40 minus 1. But eventually, like I said, this is the ruling opinion, or the prevalent opinion, that it is related to the melachot of the Mishkan. And now the problem is that when you compare the melachot of the list to the melachot that were needed, to the works that were needed for the building of the Mishkan, we don't have them. For example, there were certain melachot, certain works that the Gemara, the Mishnah, did not include in the list. For example, weeding, removing weeds from a plantation, or watering plants, cutting in a certain way, and they were not included. And then, on the other hand, the different melachot that have to do with filtering, which I mentioned yesterday, zoreh, boreh, markid, the different ways to separate the chaff from the wheat, and then stones and other things are counted. Each one is a melacha by itself. So the commentators really struggled with that, because here's a big problem. Do we look at this list and say this is the tradition? This is what Hashem told Moshe in Har Sinai exactly. This is what you're going to do. Or was there a general idea that certain things are forbidden on Shabbat, and the rabbis tried to put it into a more organized structure for people to be able to remember and to follow? And if this is the case, then you have to first understand the general structure instead of going after the details on each and every halakha here. So the Gemara asks the following questions. It says, Shavak tana didan bishul samemanim dehava b'mishkan v'nakat ofeh. In Melachot Shabbat, one of the works that is forbidden is baking. It's mentioned you cannot bake on Shabbat. But there was no baking in the Mishkan. In the construction of the Mishkan, in the process there was no baking. There was something similar, which was cooking, or boiling water. And they had to boil water to dye the wool. So the Gemara says, so why don't you mention this? If this is something that's forbidden, and instead you mention the melacha of baking, the same in the same manner they ask about shehita. There was no slaughtering needed for the construction of the Mishkan. There was killing, but not slaughtering in the way we do it. And some don't even say that the hides of the animals that were killed, that were used for the Mishkan, do not fall under the category of shehita. So all these works that are not included or included and they're not necessarily there create the problem. Then another big problem with this whole list is the location of the Mishnah. I mean, all these are indicators that there was a process that where the rabbis have to create the list. When I speak about the location of the Mishnah, the Mishnah that lists all the prohibitions, the 39 melachot, should have appeared in the first chapter of Tractate Shabbat. Right? What do you do when you present the laws of Shabbat? You say, Melachot Shabbat, here's the list. Here's what you're not supposed to do. Now, let me break it down and let me tell you number 1, number 2, number 3, etc. Instead, Masechet Shabbat, right? Masechet Shabbat start with Yetziot Shabbat, Shtayim She'en Arba'. It speaks about,
and it goes on and on and on.
On and on and on, exactly like Mali said, about taking, moving objects from the private domain to the public domain and back. So the first Masechet speaks about what you do on Friday and concentrates on Hotza'ah. It's called Hotza'ah Mereshut Lereshut, moving from one property to another. Then it speaks about lighting the candles and putting the stove, and then about what are the things that you're allowed to carry to the public property. What are the for a man weapons and the ring, the seal ring. For a woman, jewelry. And then for animals, it's be like could an animal, if you have an animal and it walks behind you, it has a harness or a saddle. Is it called carrying? All these little details that are related to Hotzah Mereshut Lereshut, to moving from one property to another. And only in the 7th chapter, the Mishnah says that if you know that Shabbat is Shabbat, but you forgot the details of the Melachot, the punishment is this, the punishment is that. And then in the 3rd or 4th Mishnah, it says this is the list of Melachot. So it doesn't come it doesn't appear at the beginning of the Mishnah, and it seems like a later addition. Another reason to think it's a later addition to the Mishnah Masechet Shabbat is that if you put the list on one hand, 39, 1 to 39, and then you take all the Mishnayot of Masechet Shabbat and you give them numbers according to the Melacha, right? Meaning, okay, let me see. Chapter number 1 deals with the work number 1. Chapter number 2, work number 2, right? That's what you would expect. It doesn't work like that. It's random. After the 7th chapter, when we find, for the first time, we find the list, the next chapters deal with Melacha number, let's say, for example, 14, 15, 12, 17, 32, 39. Some are omitted, the others are not in order, which tells us that the list didn't exist in the first edition of the Mishnah. I mean, those are all oral things until they evolved to the point when Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi put together the Mishnah in the 3rd century, in the year between 215 to 225. He put together the Mishnayot. Before him, the first way that people studied the Mishnah orally did not include the list. And therefore there was no need to correlate the Melachot one by one to the list, but rather it was sort of a random list. When the list was created, there was no way to create a list that fits the Mishnayot, because they took pre-existing, like I said before, of how do you make bread. So you have to go in order. Zoreah, Horesh, Kotzer, all these sowing, harvesting, bundling, etc. Now, so where did it come from? Why did the rabbis have to create a list of 39 melachot? They did it because people became fanatics. I mean, it's not about we think the rabbis tried to make it difficult for people. It's the other way around. They tried to make life easier for people, because at a certain point, and especially, as I mentioned, after they came back from Bavel, and the Babylonians had a very negative view of the 7th day. They thought it's a day of destruction, so you should avoid all interaction with the real world. They came back to Israel, so the Jews come back with this Babylonian tradition. The locals, on Shabbat, it's written in the book of Nehemiah, commerce and everything runs as usual. They fish, they hunt on Shabbat, they bring it and they sell it in Yerushalayim. Nehemiah, who was the Pasha, the Peha, the prince, fought them, was able to drive them out of Yerushalayim. And then later on, because people start taking upon themselves more and more prohibitions, and we have the evidence for that in what we call the Apocrypha or the external literature, especially from sectarian Judaism, those who eventually went to the Dead Sea. And what we find there's one book called Sefer HaYovlim, the Book of Jubilees, that says that for any transgression on Shabbat, one is punished by the death penalty. Then there's a book called Berit Damasek, the Covenant of Damascus, which is literature of the sectarian Jews who had their own tradition and then moved to live in the desert. They say that anyone who transgress Shabbat is banished from the community. So, okay, you say, fine, it's true. We still banish in some communities, those who are not Shomer Shabbat according to the standards are not welcome. And it is true that some melachot of Shabbat, if one does them, it's Hayav Mitah, it's a death penalty. But the interesting thing about these two books, that they put together what we consider to be biblical prohibitions, like slaughtering an animal or starting a fire, but also Hamedaber Divrei Hol or Hatzam B'Shabbat. Okay, this is fasting on Shabbat. People used to fast on Shabbat. According to the Book of Jubilees, death penalty. If you fast, one fasted on Shabbat, they executed on Motzei Shabbat. That's it. He doesn't need to eat anymore. A little more severe is Hamedaber Divrei Hol. If one speaks idle talk, right, about things that are not related to Shabbat, unholy words. He speaks about the news, he speaks like today, or just a regular synagogue. 5% of the people praise, and the other 95% update each other about what's happening in the world. Right? So according to Sefer HaYovlim, everybody would be executed. You would have very, very quiet synagogues within 1 week. So, and if a person didn't know about Shabbat and did several types of work, he would be punished for each and every one of them. So this is the background for the creation of the list. The rabbis were trying to tell people, don't go crazy. There are certain things that you can do. There are certain things that you cannot do. And if you want an easy way to remember, here's the list. And why was it easy for people to remember? Because people had to make bread, people had to make clothes, people had to do construction. So anyone who asks, what are the things that you have to do for baking? Here's the list. What do you need to do for making garments? Here's the list. So that was a mnemonic device. Later on, we'll see the literature around those prohibitions proliferated and created, some cases, probably things that were not meant by the rabbis originally. B'ezrat Hashem will discuss it further.